For decades, the Terracotta Army looked like a story already solved, an endless sea of silent soldiers built only to guard China's first emperor in death. But then, a crack in the earth revealed something no one expected. A single figure, taller, sharper, armored like no other. And in that moment, history itself split open. Because this wasn't just another clay warrior, this was a commander, and his discovery has thrown 2,000 years of China's past into chaos. His armor is different, thicker, carved with patterns no soldier ever wore. His stance is wider, his hands shaped to hold a weapon longer than any found in the pits before. And painted into the grooves of that armor, flecks of deep crimson, a forbidden color reserved only for the highest authority. Suddenly, the idea of an emperor ruling alone doesn't hold. Someone else stood close to that throne, powerful enough to wear the emperor's own colors. Scans of the statue uncovered something even stranger, hidden shards of bronze plates under the clay. And these weren't decorative. They were engineered with chromium, a metal hardening process we thought wasn't invented for another 1,000 years. This wasn't ceremonial armor. This was advanced battlefield tech, buried with a man meant to be remembered as untouchable, and scratched into one of those plates, barely visible after centuries underground. A phrase that should never have existed outside the emperor's tomb. Heaven's chosen. But here's the detail that truly unsettled the dig team. He wasn't buried with the others, not in neat rows, not in honor. His body lay hidden beneath a collapsed wooden structure, the soil packed tight, as if someone wanted him erased. Did Qin Shi Huang fear him enough to bury him in secret? Or was this commander part of a rebellion powerful enough to rewrite the empire's story? But before we uncover what else was buried with him, stop right here. If you're hooked by this mystery, hit like and subscribe, because the secrets we're about to reveal aren't just rewriting China's past. They're rewriting the history of the entire world. The eyes weren't the only thing watching. Just beyond the commander's burial, archaeologists uncovered a cluster of objects unlike anything found in the army before. Small clay figurines, no taller than a hand, positioned in a circle around him. Each one bore strange markings burned into their backs. Not Chinese script, but curved lines and crosshatch symbols no one could read. At first dismissed as decorative, tests revealed something else. The clay wasn't local. Traces of volcanic ash linked the material to a region thousands of miles west, near the fringes of ancient Central Asia. Whoever this commander was, he carried with him signs of contact with lands far outside the empire's known borders. And here was the first proof carved into his tomb. Even more chilling, the arrangement of those figurines mirrored star charts. When digitally mapped, the positions aligned almost perfectly with constellations visible over Xi'an in 210 BCE. This wasn't random. Someone deliberately coded astronomy into his grave, a cosmic language that implied his fate wasn't tied just to the emperor, but to the heavens themselves. And when infrared scanning swept deeper beneath the soil, it revealed more. Beneath the figurines lay a buried slab of stone, polished smooth, engraved with directions pointing not inward toward the emperor's tomb, but outward, away, like a secret path only he was meant to follow. The possibility emerges like a whisper. This commander was not a servant of the afterlife. He was being prepared for a journey. That journey may have been real, because in the weeks that followed, fragments of an ancient chariot were unearthed beside him. But this wasn't the heavy ceremonial chariot of the Qin dynasty. It was stripped down, lighter, aerodynamic, designed for speed. The wood had decayed, but bronze fittings remained intact, cast in a design more advanced than any known Chinese vehicle of the time. What stunned the team most was the axle, not straight, but slightly bowed, engineered for maneuverability on uneven ground. This was technology historians believed wouldn't appear until centuries later in distant cultures. Yet here it was, buried with one man. Was this commander preparing to travel routes the emperor himself never dared tread? Or had he already done it, leaving behind technology borrowed from faraway lands? The mysteries deepened with the discovery of weapon fragments near his statue. Unlike the standard bronze spears and swords found with ordinary soldiers, these weapons carried traces of materials no one could explain, faint residues of nickel and cobalt fused into the bronze, producing a sheen that resisted rust after more than 2 millennia underground. Metallurgists confirmed the alloy wasn't Chinese at all. It resembled techniques later used in Persia. The implication was staggering. Not only had this commander carried foreign ideas, he carried foreign steel, weapons forged in an exchange the history books have never recorded. The Terracotta army was meant to symbolize isolationist power, yet here was evidence of an empire already reaching across continents. But the soil held darker truths. When samples were tested around the commander's grave, researchers found unusually high traces of mercury. At first, it seemed like contamination from the emperor's own tomb, long rumored to contain rivers of liquid mercury. But the levels here were localized, concentrated only around the commander's burial site. Some scientists suggested ritual poisoning, the deliberate use of mercury to seal his spirit, to trap him in the earth forever. Others believed it hinted at something more sinister, that his death wasn't natural, that perhaps he was executed, buried alive in clay, punished for knowing or holding power too great to be allowed to survive. And then came the carvings. On the underside of one broken clay tile above his resting place were markings that had been hidden for centuries, facing the soil, invisible until now. They were words. Rough, hurried, scratched deep into wet clay by a human hand. Translated, they read, "He still breathes." A message so chilling that the dig team stopped work for days. Was this an act of rebellion, carved by workers forced to bury the commander alive? Or was it a warning, meant for the future, that his legacy could not be smothered, no matter how tightly the earth was sealed? Deeper scans of the pit revealed chambers extending far beyond what had been mapped before. Long corridors branching like veins from the emperor's tomb, hidden for over 2,000 years. One corridor led directly beneath the commander's resting place. Inside, they found collapsed wooden beams and shattered pottery, but also something far more dangerous, a cluster of sealed bronze spheres, corroded but intact. When one was tested, researchers discovered it contained a mix of sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter, the base ingredients of gunpowder, centuries before gunpowder was supposed to exist. If this was deliberate, then the Qin dynasty may have flirted with weapons of fire long before history gives them credit. And if these were buried with the commander, it meant he was trusted, or feared, as the keeper of forbidden technology. The implications only escalated when a final layer of soil beneath him revealed a burial unlike any seen before. Dozens of skeletons arranged in a circle, their skulls pierced clean through. Tests suggested they were executed violently, their bodies placed as guardians or sacrifices, yet they weren't common soldiers. Their bone structure revealed a mix of ethnicities, some from China's heartland, others with features linked to Central Asian nomads. This wasn't a random massacre. It was a ritual binding men from across borders forced to die in service to one man's passage into eternity. The emperor commanded armies of clay, but this commander, in death, commanded men of flesh and blood. And still, the final discovery may have been the most terrifying. When light was cast against the commander's statue at a sharp angle, faint grooves appeared across his chest armor, grooves that formed a map, but not of the empire, not of rivers, not of mountains. The lines converged on a single location, far to the west, deep in what is now desert, a place not listed in any Chinese record, yet marked as if it were his true destination. For centuries, we've believed the Terracotta Army was built to protect the emperor's afterlife. But maybe, just maybe, it was built to guard something else, something the commander carried, something the empire was never meant to reveal. When researchers traced the grooves on the commander's chest to their endpoint, the coordinates didn't lead to an ordinary site. They pointed straight into the Taklamakan Desert, one of the most hostile landscapes on Earth, known as the Sea of Death. For centuries, legends whispered of entire armies vanishing without a trace in its sands. Yet satellite scans near the marked spot revealed something buried, a rectangular outline spanning hundreds of meters, too geometric to be natural. The shape resembled a fortress, but unlike any known chin structure. To test the theory, ground-penetrating radar was deployed, and the images it produced sent shockwaves through the team. Beneath the dunes lay massive walls and corridors, and inside, anomalies resembling hundreds of sealed chambers, untouched for millennia. Among the most startling readings were metallic echoes far denser than clay. Objects large enough to be chariots, weapons, or machinery locked in the sand. One signal was unlike any other. A hollow chamber beneath the fortress, perfectly spherical, 30 meters across, as though engineered to be airtight. No known Qin architecture matched it. If this was part of the commander's map, it meant he wasn't pointing to treasure, but to a hidden complex, a base, perhaps even a vault, designed to keep something sealed away from the world. And the chilling detail, the position of that fortress aligned precisely with the same star pattern carved into the figurines buried around him. This wasn't coincidence. It was a celestial marker, binding the earth to the sky. Then came the discovery of writings linked to the commander, hidden not underground, but in forgotten archives. A bamboo scroll unearthed decades ago in a rural tomb had long been dismissed as fragmentary myth. But re-examined with new imaging, the text revealed passages about the general who walks with heaven's fire. The scroll spoke of a man entrusted with guarding the path of the Red Star and claimed he commanded armies both of the emperor and beyond. Scholars had ignored it because no name was given. Now, the connection was unavoidable. The commander wasn't just buried in secret. His story had been deliberately scattered, encoded in fragments, waiting for rediscovery. The fragments led to another shock, evidence that this man's lineage didn't vanish with him. DNA extracted from bone fragments found in the surrounding sacrifices suggested genetic links to communities still living in Western China today, people whose oral traditions speak of an ancestor who led armies of clay and blood. For generations, those stories were dismissed as folklore. But now, the science aligns. The commander may have descendants alive right now, people carrying bloodlines of a man powerful enough to rival the emperor himself. But the revelations weren't confined to China. Thousands of miles away, in the ruins of Persepolis in Iran, archaeologists re-examining fragments of cuneiform tablets found something extraordinary, a reference to the armored emissaries of the East. The description was uncanny. Warriors with faces carved in stone, eyes black as obsidian, marching beneath banners of crimson. Scholars had never been able to place it, but paired with the commander's crimson-painted armor and obsidian pupil eyes, the match was undeniable. This man wasn't hidden by China alone. His presence rippled into the records of distant civilizations. As these threads connected, a darker layer emerged. New analysis of the commander's pigments revealed traces of a mineral not found in China at all, but native to Afghanistan. Lapis lazuli, ground into dust. The mineral was prized in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Rome. Yet here it was, painted into the armor of a Chinese commander buried in 210 BCE. That detail alone shattered the timeline of ancient trade, suggesting a network far older and faster than history acknowledges. If Qin's empire had already tapped into this, then the commander wasn't just a local general. He was the keeper of a global web, stretching across continents long before the Silk Road was supposed to exist. The weapon fragments buried with him continued to tell their own story. Reconstructed, they revealed innovations previously unthinkable. A crossbow, with a trigger mechanism engineered so precisely it rivaled modern firearms, its release calibrated for consistent force. Alongside it lay arrowheads laced with traces of plant toxins, proof that chemical warfare was being experimented with under Qin rule. And chillingly, the toxins matched species not native to China, but to the Himalayas. Evidence that soldiers under this commander had scouted and harvested poisons from far beyond their homeland. This wasn't defense. This was expansion, conquest. A program far more aggressive than official history ever allowed. The further archaeologists pushed into the pit, the stranger it became. They unearthed a stone stele, cracked but still legible, bearing an inscription no one expected to find. The second emperor will not rise. Qin Shi Huang's son and successor was indeed overthrown shortly after his father's death, leading to the dynasty's collapse. But this stele suggested that collapse wasn't fate. It was planned, foreseen, maybe even engineered. Was the commander part of that conspiracy? Did he and others like him move against the emperor's bloodline, burying themselves in clay, not as guardians, but as silent witnesses to a dynasty they chose to destroy? And then, the final revelation, uncovered not underground, but through the commander's very gaze. High-resolution scans of his obsidian-painted eyes revealed microscopic carvings invisible to the naked eye. Each iris contained a spiral of etchings, like grooves on a record. When digitally mapped, the grooves formed patterns shockingly similar to an ancient Chinese cipher, one that, when translated, spelled out coordinates. But these weren't coordinates within China. They pointed across deserts, across seas, to the ruins of Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, the world's oldest known temple, built 6,000 years before Qin ever ruled. The commander's eyes weren't just watching. They were encoding a message, that his story wasn't Chinese alone, but part of a thread stretching across the ancient world, binding empires, secrets, and technologies in ways no history book has ever dared to admit. The etchings inside his pupils were only the beginning. When the spiral grooves were digitally enhanced, researchers noticed something else: faint interruptions in the pattern, gaps that repeated at precise intervals. Converted into sound, the gaps produced tones, 5 notes, rising and falling like a primitive code. When compared to fragments of ancient Chinese musical scripts, the notes aligned with a melody once used only in royal ceremonies to call upon the heavens. The commander's eyes weren't just coordinates. They carried a signal, a ritual preserved in silence, encoded to be seen only when the right technology finally existed to read them. That melody resurfaced again, in an unexpected place, in a small mountain shrine nearly 1,000 miles west. An inscription carved in stone recorded the same 5 notes, depicted as circles and lines. The shrine dated centuries after the Qin dynasty, yet its builders had no connection to China. Locals claimed the design came from strangers who appeared in the desert long ago. Strangers armored in scales of bronze who spoke of a fallen empire and a path to eternity. The implication was chilling. The commander's knowledge didn't die with him. Fragments of it escaped, scattered across cultures, carried by those who may have followed his secret map out of China. And still, the ground beneath his tomb had more to give. Further scans revealed a hidden cavity, sealed behind layers of rammed earth, untouched since the day it was buried. Inside were wooden crates, the wood long decayed, but the contents preserved. Tablets of bamboo, bound in lacquer, their surfaces etched with text unlike any Qin record. The writing mixed Chinese characters with symbols resembling those on the small figurines. Hybrid script, part local, part foreign. Scholars who attempted translation found phrases that shouldn't have existed in that age. Cycles of return, heaven's machinery, the red star descends. These weren't commands of war or administration. They were prophecies, coded messages about celestial events, as though the commander was not only a soldier, but a keeper of cosmic knowledge. One tablet went further, describing a chamber beneath the western sands, where the sky's fire will sleep until the gate is opened. The words matched too closely with the radar scans of the fortress beneath the Taklamakan Desert. The commander wasn't just buried with a map. He was buried with instructions, warnings, and a timeline. And hidden in the script was a date scholars have yet to announce publicly, marked by the next alignment of constellations identical to those inscribed in the figurines. That alignment doesn't belong to the past. It belongs to our present century. But the trail didn't stop in China or Central Asia. In the archives of the Vatican, a Jesuit manuscript from the 1600s described travelers in the East uncovering idols of stone with eyes of black fire, pointing toward a city buried in sand. The Jesuit scribes dismissed it as legend, yet included sketches of the statue's armor. When compared with the newly discovered commander, the sketches matched detail for detail, down to the grooves across the chest. Somehow, fragments of his existence had bled into Europe centuries before modern archaeology, passed through whispers, carried by men who barely understood what they had seen. The commander's reach had never been confined to China alone. The reach grew stranger still when scientists compared isotopes in the commander's clay with those from Göbekli Tepe. The match was undeniable. Microscopic traces of the same volcanic ash embedded in the soil. Two sites separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles shared identical chemical fingerprints. This wasn't a coincidence. It was proof of a link, direct or indirect, that rewrote the very origins of civilization. The commander's tomb was no isolated wonder. It was a node in a network stretching back to humanity's deepest roots. More secrets bled from the earth when excavators uncovered a row of bronze mirrors hidden behind a wall near the commander's pit. Each mirror was inscribed with intricate spirals that caught light in uncanny ways. When illuminated, the spirals projected patterns resembling star maps, identical to those carved into the figurines. But one mirror contained something different, a projection not of stars, but of lines and arcs forming a diagram eerily close to the orbits of planets. Ancient Chinese astronomers had no way of charting such precision. Yet here it was, entombed with a man erased from the Empire's official record. He hadn't just commanded soldiers. He commanded knowledge that belonged nowhere in his time. And still, the final revelations pushed beyond the boundary of belief. Deep in the collapsed corridor beneath the commander's chamber, archaeologists retrieved a skull unlike the others. Larger, elongated, with features not matching any known population of the Qin Empire. The DNA was too degraded to sequence, but its shape echoed descriptions from Central Asian nomads, of giants who walked with the armies of the East. Was this another of the commander's allies, a foreigner, a stranger, buried among sacrifices to bind the secret forever? Or was it something older, something the Empire itself could not control? The last artifact to surface was a bronze seal found clutched in the clay hand of one of the skeletons. The seal bore a single inscription, a circle surrounding 3 flames. No dynasty symbol matched it, but carved into its underside were words etched in both Chinese and an unknown script. "Do not wake the fire." The warning was as clear as it was cryptic. It tied back to the tablets, to the fortress in the desert, to the chamber said to hold the sky's fire, waiting to awaken. And then came the moment that silenced the entire dig team. When they raised the commander's statue under controlled light, for the first time in over 2,000 years, the obsidian pupils glimmered. In the reflection, perfectly aligned, appeared the faint outline of a star, a red star, burning in the same position described on the hidden tablets. The commander's eyes were not only carved to watch, they were carved to reflect, to catch a celestial sign when the time was right. And now, after centuries of silence, that reflection had returned. No one can say what happens when the alignment comes again. But as the star burns brighter in the night sky, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The commander was never meant to be forgotten. He was meant to be found.